Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The afternoon rush at Sweet Dreams Bakery was always hectic, but today felt different. His 8-year-old daughter Emma sat in the corner booth, coloring pictures while waiting for him to finish his shift. The babysitter had canceled last minute, leaving Marcus no choice but to bring Emma to work. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a woman in an expensive navy suit enter. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and confident stride screamed corporate executive. She approached the counter with the kind of purposeful walk that suggested she was used to getting things done quickly. "I need a chocolate mousse cake for 12 people," she said without looking up from her phone. "It's for a board meeting in 2 hours. Please tell me you have something ready." Marcus glanced at the display case. They had exactly one chocolate mousse cake left, but it was already reserved for the Johnson anniversary party pickup at 4 o'clock. The Johnsons were regular customers who had ordered it 3 days ago for their golden wedding anniversary celebration. "I'm sorry, but our last chocolate mousse cake is already spoken for," Marcus explained politely. "However, I can offer you our signature red velvet cake or perhaps a beautiful tiramisu. Both are excellent for business meetings." The woman finally looked up from her phone, and Marcus noticed the stress lines around her eyes. Despite her polished appearance, something seemed to be weighing heavily on her mind. "You don't understand," she said, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "This isn't just any meeting. I'm presenting to the board about our company's new community outreach program. The chocolate mousse cake was specifically requested by our chairman, who has very particular tastes. If I show up with the wrong dessert..." She trailed off, but Marcus could see the genuine worry in her expression. He had been working at the bakery for 3 years since his wife passed away, and he had developed a good sense for reading people. This wasn't about being difficult or demanding. This woman was clearly under enormous pressure. Emma looked up from her coloring book and studied the worried lady at the counter. At 8 years old, she had already learned to recognize when adults were upset. Her own father often had that same look when he thought she wasn't watching, usually when bills came in the mail or when he had to work extra shifts. "Daddy, why? Does the lady look sad?" Emma whispered, but her voice carried in the quiet bakery. The woman glanced over at Emma and managed a small smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just a little worried about work." Marcus felt torn. The Johnsons had been loyal customers, and he prided himself on keeping his word. But this woman clearly needed help, and something about her situation reminded him of his own struggles as a single parent trying to make everything work. "What if I call the Johnsons and explain the situation?" Marcus offered. "Maybe they would understand if we provided them with something equally special for their anniversary. I could personally deliver it to them and make sure they're happy with the substitution." The woman's eyes widened with surprise. "You would do that? But they're your customers. Won't they be upset?" "The Johnsons are good people," Marcus replied. "They might understand if I explain that someone really needs our help today. Let me give them a call." As Marcus reached for the phone, Emma approached the counter with her coloring book. She had been listening to the entire conversation with the serious expression she wore when trying to solve grown-up problems. "Lady, what's your name?" Emma asked. "I'm Victoria," the woman replied, kneeling down to Emma's level. "What's yours?" "I'm Emma. My daddy always says that when people are nice to us, we should try to be nice back. You seem really nice, and you're worried about your work friends. Daddy will figure out how to help you." Victoria felt something catch in her throat. The simple wisdom of this child, combined with her father's willingness to go out of his way for a complete stranger, was unlike anything she encountered in her usual business world. Marcus dialed the Johnsons' number, hoping they would understand. As the phone rang, he watched Victoria talking quietly with Emma about her drawings. For a moment, the stressed executive facade dropped away, and he saw someone who looked genuinely touched by his daughter's kindness. Mrs. Johnson answered on the third ring, and Marcus began to explain the situation. He spoke honestly about the woman who needed their help and offered to create something even more special for their anniversary celebration. To his relief, Mrs. Johnson listened patiently and then surprised him with her response. "Marcus, dear, you know what? Harold and I have been married for 50 years. We've learned that the best celebrations come from helping others when they need it most. Give that woman our cake, and you can surprise us with whatever you think is best for our anniversary. We trust you completely." Marcus hung up the phone with a smile spreading across his face. Victoria had been watching nervously, and Emma had been holding her breath in anticipation. "Good news," Marcus announced. "The Johnson said you can have the chocolate mousse cake. They're happy to help someone who needs it." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. In her world of corporate competition and self-interest, such generosity was almost unheard of. A stranger was willing to potentially upset loyal customers just to help her succeed in her meeting. "I don't know what to say," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is incredibly kind of you." As Marcus carefully boxed up the beautiful chocolate mousse cake, he noticed Victoria watching Emma color her pictures. There was something wistful in her expression, as if she was seeing something she had forgotten existed. The simple act of kindness from a single father and his young daughter had set something in motion that none of them could have predicted. Sometimes the most meaningful connections begin with the smallest gestures of compassion. Victoria stood outside the gleaming corporate headquarters of Henderson Industries, holding the carefully boxed chocolate mousse cake. The 30-story building represented everything she had worked toward for the past 15 years of her career. As the vice president of strategic development, she was one of only 3 women in senior leadership positions at the company. The board meeting was scheduled to begin in 40 minutes, and Victoria used the time to review her presentation notes. One final time. The community outreach program she was proposing would allocate $2 million towards supporting local small businesses and families in need. It was her passion project, something she had been developing for months. But as she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Victoria found herself thinking less about quarterly projections and more about the interaction at the bakery. The genuine kindness from Marcus and the innocent wisdom from 8-year-old Emma had stirred something inside her that had been dormant for years. When had she stopped noticing the small gestures of human kindness? When had she become so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that she forgot what it felt like to simply help someone because it was the right thing to do? The boardroom was already filling with executives when Victoria arrived. Chairman Robert Henderson sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expression characteristically stern. At 68, he had built Henderson Industries from a small manufacturing company into a multinational corporation, and he was known for his exacting standards and attention to detail. "Victoria, excellent timing," Chairman Henderson said as she entered. "I trust you have the chocolate mousse cake I requested? My late wife used to make the most incredible chocolate mousse, and it always puts me in the right frame of mind for important discussions." Victoria carefully placed the cake on the side table and began setting up her presentation materials. Around the table sat 12 of the most influential business leaders in the city, each one capable of making or breaking her proposal with a single vote. "Gentlemen and Victoria," Chairman Henderson began, "today we're discussing the proposed community outreach initiative. I'll be honest, I'm skeptical about allocating $2 million toward what essentially amounts to charity work. However, Victoria has requested this meeting, so let's hear what she has to say." Victoria stood and activated the presentation screen. She had practiced this pitch dozens of times, focusing on return on investment, tax benefits, and positive publicity. But as she began to speak, something unexpected happened. Instead of launching into her prepared corporate speak, she found herself thinking about Marcus and Emma. "Before I begin with the financial projections," Victoria said, surprising herself, "I want to tell you about something that happened to me 2 hours ago." She described her visit to Sweet Dreams Bakery, explaining how a single father had been willing to potentially upset longtime customers just to help a stranger succeed. She told them about Emma, who had offered simple wisdom about being kind to people who are kind to you. The room was unusually quiet as Victoria spoke. These executives were accustomed to hearing about market share and profit margins, not personal stories about kindness from 8-year-old children. "The reason I'm telling you this," Victoria continued, "is because it reminded me why I originally proposed this community outreach program. It's not just about tax benefits or positive publicity. It's about recognizing that we have the power to make a real difference in people's lives. She clicked to her first slide, which showed photographs of local small businesses struggling to stay afloat. Henderson Industries made a profit of $460 million last year. The $2 million I'm requesting represents less than half of 1% of our annual profits, but it could transform dozens of lives. Victoria went on to present her research about Marcus and businesses like Sweet Dreams Bakery. She had discovered that single parents made up 37% of small business owners in their city, many of them struggling to balance entrepreneurship with raising children alone. I propose we create microloans for single-parent entrepreneurs, scholarship programs for their children, and mentorship opportunities that connect our executives with local business owners, Victoria explained. We could sponsor after-school programs at businesses like Sweet Dreams Bakery, where working parents could safely bring their children while they finish their shifts. As she spoke, Victoria noticed Chairman Henderson leaning forward with interest. Several other board members were taking notes, which was always a positive sign. The financial benefits are substantial, Victoria continued, transitioning to her prepared material about tax advantages and community goodwill. But beyond the numbers, this program represents an opportunity for Henderson Industries to be genuinely connected to the community that has supported our growth. When Victoria finished her presentation, the room remained silent for several long moments. Chairman Henderson steepled his fingers and studied the cake sitting on the side table. "Victoria, that was quite compelling," he said finally. "However, I have one question before we proceed with any vote." Victoria felt her heart rate increase. "Yes, sir. Is that chocolate mousse cake from the same bakery you mentioned in your story?" "Yes, it is. Sweet Dreams Bakery on Maple Street, Chairman." Henderson smiled, the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from him in the 3 years she had worked directly under his leadership. "Then let's taste it before we make our decision. If a single father is willing to go out of his way to help a stranger succeed, I want to know what kind of quality he puts into his work." As Chairman Henderson cut into the cake, Victoria realized that everything hinged on this moment. Not just her career or her proposal, but the opportunity to help people like Marcus and Emma, who had shown her what genuine kindness looked like. The chocolate mousse was perfect, rich, and smooth, with just the right balance of sweetness. "Chairman." Henderson took a thoughtful bite, and his expression softened in a way that surprised everyone in the room. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "This tastes exactly like the chocolate mousse my late wife used to make for our anniversary every year." The room remained silent as Chairman Henderson took another bite, lost in what appeared to be cherished memories. Victoria held her breath, wondering if this unexpected connection would help or hurt her cause. When Chairman Henderson finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes, though his voice remained steady and professional. "Victoria, I'd like to call for an immediate vote on your proposal. All in favor of funding the community outreach program?" 11 hands went up around the table. Victoria stared in amazement as her proposal was unanimously approved. "Furthermore," Chairman Henderson added, "I want Sweet Dreams Bakery to be our first partner business. This Marcus gentleman sounds like exactly the kind of person we should be supporting." 3 weeks after the board meeting, Victoria found herself standing outside Sweet Dreams Bakery again. This time, however, she wasn't a desperate executive seeking a last-minute solution. She was there as the official representative of Henderson Industries' new community outreach program, carrying a folder containing documents that could change Marcus and Emma's lives forever. The bell chimed as she entered, and Marcus looked up from behind the counter where he was decorating a birthday cake with careful precision. His face brightened with recognition, though he looked surprised to see her again. "Victoria, what brings you back to our little bakery?" Marcus asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "Don't tell me you need another emergency cake." Emma was once again sitting in the corner booth, this time working on homework instead of coloring. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted Victoria, as if greeting an old friend rather than someone she had met only once. "Actually, I came here specifically to see you and Emma," Victoria said, feeling nervous in a way that boardroom presentations never made her feel. "That chocolate mousse cake you provided saved my career, and I wanted to thank you properly." Marcus set down his decorating bag, and gave Victoria his full attention. Over the past 3 weeks, he had often thought about the stressed executive who had needed their help. He had wondered if her meeting had gone well and if she had found some peace from whatever pressure she had been under. "I hope everything worked out with your presentation," Marcus said genuinely. "You seemed really worried that day." "It worked out better than I ever imagined," Victoria replied, opening her folder. "In fact, it worked out so well that I'm here to offer you something that might seem too good to be true." She explained about Henderson Industries' new community outreach program and how Marcus's kindness had inspired her entire presentation. As she spoke, Marcus's expression shifted from curiosity to amazement to something approaching disbelief. "We want to offer Sweet Dreams Bakery a small business development loan of $50,000 at 0% interest," Victoria continued. "Additionally, we'd like to sponsor an after-school program here where working parents can safely leave their children while they finish their workday." Marcus sat down heavily on the stool behind the counter. $50,000 would allow him to expand the bakery, hire additional help, and perhaps most importantly, provide financial security for Emma's future that he had only dreamed about. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "Why would a huge corporation want to help a small bakery like mine?" Emma had stopped pretending to do homework and was listening intently to every word. At 8 years old, she didn't fully understand the financial implications, but she could tell that something very important was happening. "Because," Victoria explained, "your willingness to help a stranger reminded our chairman and our entire board of directors what business should really be about. It's not just about profits and market share. It's about people helping people." She pulled out additional documents from her folder. "There's more. We want to establish a college scholarship fund for Emma. It would cover her full tuition, room, and board at any university she chooses when the time comes." Marcus stared at the papers in front of him, his hands trembling slightly. Since his wife had died 4 years ago, every day had been a struggle to provide for Emma while building a business that could give them stability. There had been countless nights when he lay awake worrying about how he would afford Emma's future education, or what would happen if the bakery failed. "Daddy, are you okay?" Emma asked, sliding out of her booth and approaching the counter with concern in her voice. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Victoria, then back at the documents that represented more hope than he had dared to imagine in years. "I'm more than okay, sweetheart. I think we just received a miracle." Victoria watched the interaction between father and daughter, feeling moved by their obvious devotion to each other. In her corporate world, she was surrounded by people who measured success in stock options and quarterly bonuses. But here, she was witnessing what real success looked like. A father who put his child's welfare above everything else and a little girl who clearly adored her daddy. "There is one condition," Victoria said, causing Marcus to look up sharply. "Henderson Industries would like to feature Sweet Dreams Bakery in our annual Community Impact Report. We want to tell your story as an example of the kind of business we're proud to support." "What exactly does that mean?" Marcus asked cautiously. "It means that your story of kindness would be shared with our investors, employees, and community partners. We believe that highlighting businesses like yours will inspire others to prioritize community over pure profit." Emma tugged on her father's apron to get his attention. "Daddy, this is like when you read me stories about people who do good things, and then good things happen to them." Marcus smiled at his daughter's simple wisdom. "You're right, Em. Sometimes good things do happen to people who try to help others." He turned back to Victoria with gratitude evident in his voice. "I accept your offer, but I have one request of my own." "What's that?" "I want to continue our tradition with the Johnsons. Every month I'd like to donate a special cake to a family in need, just like they allowed me to give you theirs. It seems only right to pass along the kindness they showed that day." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. Even when being offered life-changing assistance, Marcus was thinking about how he could help others. This was exactly the kind of character that had convinced Chairman Henderson to approve the entire program. "I think that's a beautiful idea," Victoria said. In fact, Henderson Industries would be honored to sponsor those monthly donations. As Victoria prepared to leave, Emma approached her with a carefully folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. It's a picture of that day when you came here and looked sad, but now you're smiling. Victoria unfolded the drawing, to see stick figures representing the three of them standing behind a counter with a cake. Above the scene, Emma had written in careful 8-year-old handwriting, "Friends help friends." "Emma, this is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me," Victoria said, kneeling down to hug the little girl. "Thank you for reminding me what friendship really means." As Victoria walked back to her car, she realized that the community outreach program had changed her own life as much as it would change Marcus and Emma's. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely excited about going to work, knowing that her efforts would directly impact real families, rather than just improving quarterly reports. Behind her, through the bakery window, she could see Marcus, lifting Emma into the air in celebration, both of them laughing with pure joy. The image stayed with Victoria long after she drove away, reminding her that sometimes the most important business deals are the ones that happen between human hearts. 6 months later, Sweet Dreams Bakery had transformed beyond recognition. The $50,000 loan had allowed Marcus to expand into the neighboring storefront, creating a bright, welcoming space with comfortable seating areas and a dedicated homework corner for children. The after-school program Victoria had proposed was serving 15 local families, providing a safe space where kids could work on assignments while their parents finished their workday. Victoria had become a regular visitor to the bakery, initially, for professional reasons as she monitored the success of their pilot program. But over time, her visits had evolved into something more personal. She found herself stopping by on difficult days, drawn by the warmth and authenticity that seemed to permeate everything Marcus and Emma touched. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Victoria arrived to find the bakery buzzing with unusual activity. Emma was standing on a small stool behind the counter, carefully piping frosting onto cupcakes under her father's watchful guidance. 3 other children from the after-school program were gathered around, offering enthusiastic but not entirely helpful suggestions. "Victoria," Emma called out when she spotted her. "Look what I'm doing. Daddy is teaching me how to make the roses like the ones on wedding cakes." Marcus looked up from where he was managing 3 different timer alarms, his face flushed but happy from the organized chaos. "We're preparing for the Henderson Industries Employee Appreciation event tomorrow," he explained. 300 cupcakes, 2 large cakes, and a chocolate fountain. Victoria felt a flutter of panic. "Tomorrow? The employee event isn't until next week." "Actually," Marcus said gently, "it's definitely tomorrow. I have the order form right here with tomorrow's date. Don't worry, we'll be ready." Victoria pulled out her phone to check her calendar and felt her stomach drop. Marcus was right. Somehow, in the midst of managing multiple community outreach projects, she had mixed up the dates in her mind. The event was tomorrow, and she was nowhere near prepared. "Oh no," she said, sinking into one of the chairs at the homework table. "I was supposed to coordinate with the caterers, arrange for the decorations, and confirm the venue setup. How could I have made such a mistake?" Emma immediately abandoned her cupcake decorating and approached Victoria with the serious expression she wore when adults were in trouble. "What's wrong? Why do you look like you did that first day you came here?" "I made a big mistake with my work, sweetheart," Victoria admitted. "I got confused about when an important party was supposed to happen, and now I don't have enough time to make everything perfect." The children from the after-school program had gathered around, sensing that something significant was happening. These kids had all learned to be sensitive to adult stress, coming from families where parents often struggled with work pressures and financial concerns. "Maybe we can help," suggested 10-year-old Miguel, whose mother worked double shifts at the hospital. "My mom always says that when people help each other, big problems become smaller problems." Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and joined the impromptu problem-solving session. "What exactly needs to be done for tomorrow?" Victoria explained that the employee appreciation event was crucial for company morale and that Chairman Henderson would be attending personally. She needed to coordinate with caterers, arrange decorative elements, and ensure that the venue was properly set up for 300 employees. "The decorations are the biggest problem," Victoria said. "I had planned to order professional arrangements, but it's too late now. Everything will look so plain and uninspiring." Emma's face lit up with inspiration. We could make decorations. Everyone in our after-school program is really good at art projects. Remember the amazing decorations we made for Miguel's mom's birthday last month? The children began talking excitedly about their various artistic skills. Miguel was excellent. At paper flower crafts, 8-year-old Sarah had a talent for calligraphy, and twins Jake and Jordan were masters at creating impressive banners from basic materials. That's very sweet, Victoria said. But this is a corporate event. The decorations need to be sophisticated and professional. Marcus had been listening thoughtfully to the entire conversation. Victoria, do you remember what you told the board of directors about this community outreach program? You said it was about recognizing that business should be about people helping people. Yes, but what does that have to do with decorations? What if the decorations were made by the people your program is helping? What if every employee at Henderson Industries could see the direct impact of their company's community investment? Victoria considered this unexpected perspective. The idea was certainly unconventional, but there was something appealing about the authenticity it would bring to the event. We could make it a theme, Marcus continued, warming to his idea. Instead of generic corporate decorations, everything could showcase the community connections that Henderson Industries has built. Photos of the families you've helped, artwork created by the kids in our after-school program, even samples of products from the local businesses you've supported. Emma clapped her hands together excitedly. And I could make a special cake that tells the story of how you and Daddy met, with little decorations showing the bakery and your office building. And everything. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. These people were offering to spend their entire evening creating decorations for an event they weren't even invited to, simply because they wanted to help her succeed. It was the same generous spirit that Marcus had shown 6 months ago when he gave up the chocolate mousse cake. You would really do that for me? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course we would, Marcus replied. You've changed our lives, Victoria. This bakery is thriving because you believed in us. Emma has a college fund because you saw potential in a single father trying to do his best. Why wouldn't we want to help you when you need it? The children were already making plans, discussing color schemes and design ideas with the enthusiasm that only kids could bring to a creative project. Victoria watched them and realized that this employee appreciation event might end up being more meaningful than any professionally planned corporate gathering could have been. All right, Victoria said, standing up with renewed energy. Let's do this, but I'm calling my assistant to bring over supplies and I'm ordering pizza for everyone who's willing to help. If we're going to create something special, we're going to do it right. As the afternoon turned into evening, Sweet Dreams Bakery became a bustling creative workshop. Victoria's assistant arrived with boxes of supplies, followed by several other Henderson Industries employees who had heard about the impromptu decoration-making session and wanted to help. For the first time in her corporate career, Victoria found herself sitting on the floor, cutting out paper decorations alongside 8-year-old children and small business owners. Her expensive suit was wrinkled. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose from its pins and her manicured nails were stained with markers and glue, and she had never felt more professionally fulfilled in her life. By 10 o'clock that night, they had created enough decorations to transform the Henderson Industries Conference Center into a warm, community-focused celebration space. More importantly, Victoria had discovered what it felt like to be part of a team that worked together not for profit margins or performance bonuses, but simply because they cared about each other's success. The morning of the employee appreciation event arrived with unexpected complications. Victoria stood in the Henderson Industries Conference Center at 6 in the morning, surrounded by boxes of homemade decorations and feeling more nervous than she had before any boardroom presentation in her career. The professional event coordinator she had hired months ago had called at 5:30 to inform her that half of his staff was sick with flu and the other half was dealing with a family emergency. The catering company was running 2 hours behind schedule due to a kitchen equipment failure. The sound system had mysteriously stopped working overnight, and the maintenance crew couldn't arrive until after lunch. 300 employees would arrive at noon expecting a celebration, and Victoria had no professional support system to make it happen. For a moment, she considered calling Chairman Henderson to suggest postponing the entire event. Then her phone rang. It was Marcus. Good morning. His cheerful voice came through the speaker. Emma and I are loading up the bakery truck with everything we made last night. We should be there in about 20 minutes to start setting up. Marcus, you don't understand, Victoria said, her voice tight with stress. Everything is falling apart. The coordinator canceled, the caterers are delayed, and the sound system isn't working. Maybe we should just postpone the whole thing. There was a brief pause before Marcus responded. Victoria, do you remember what you told me 6 months ago, when I was worried about disappointing the Johnsons? You said that sometimes the best solutions come from the heart, not from perfect planning. Before Victoria could respond, she heard Emma's voice in the background. Tell Victoria that we're bringing extra supplies and our speaker from the bakery. And tell her that Miguel's mom is coming with 3 other nurses who have the day off. And Sarah's dad is bringing his guitar. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized what was happening. The community that Henderson Industries had chosen to support was now mobilizing to support her in return. Over the next 2 hours, Sweet Dreams Bakery became the unofficial headquarters for event coordination. Marcus and Emma arrived with their truck full of decorations, followed by a steady stream of families from the after-school program. Miguel's mother brought a team of healthcare workers who had experience organizing hospital fundraisers. Sarah's father, a music teacher, set up an impromptu sound system using equipment from the local high school. The twins Jake and Jordan arrived with their teenage cousins, who immediately took charge of hanging banners and arranging the handmade centerpieces. Mrs. Johnson, from the anniversary cake incident that had started everything, appeared with a group of senior volunteers from her church, ready to help with whatever needed to be done. Victoria watched in amazement as this diverse group of people, most of whom had never met each other before, worked together with seamless cooperation. There was no corporate hierarchy, no competition for credit, just individuals focused on creating something beautiful together. Emma had appointed herself as Victoria's personal assistant, staying close by with a clipboard where she kept track of tasks in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. Victoria, the flower arrangements are done, the sound system is working, and Daddy says the backup cupcakes will be here in 1 hour, she reported seriously. By 11:30, the conference center had been completely transformed. The handmade decorations created a warm, welcoming atmosphere that no professional event coordinator could have achieved. Photo displays showcased the success stories of local businesses supported by the community outreach program. Children's artwork brightened every corner, and the scent of fresh pastries from Sweet Dreams Bakery filled the air. This is incredible, Victoria murmured, looking around at what they had accomplished together. It's beautiful because it's real, Marcus said, standing beside her as they surveyed their work. Every decoration tells the story of someone your program has helped. Every person here today volunteered their time because they wanted to give back to a company that cared about them. At exactly noon, Henderson Industries employees began arriving for their appreciation event. Victoria watched nervously as her colleagues entered the transformed space, wondering how they would react to decorations made by children and volunteers instead of professional designers. The response exceeded her wildest expectations. Employees lingered at the photo displays, reading about local businesses they had never heard of. They examined the children's artwork with genuine interest, many of them taking pictures to share with their own families. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful in a way that formal corporate events rarely achieved. Chairman Henderson arrived at 12:30, accompanied by the entire board of directors. Victoria felt her stomach clench as she watched him survey the unconventional decorations, trying to read his expression. Victoria, Chairman Henderson said as he approached her, this is remarkable. I've never seen our employees so engaged at a company event. How did you manage to create such an authentic community atmosphere? Before Victoria could respond, Emma appeared at her side, still carrying her clipboard with impressive authority for an 8-year-old event coordinator. Mr. Henderson, sir, Emma said politely. Victoria didn't do this by herself. All the families from Sweet Dreams Bakery helped her because she helped us first. That's what friends do. Chairman Henderson knelt down to Emma's level, his expression softening as it had during the chocolate mousse cake incident months earlier. And you are Emma, correct? The young lady whose father provided the cake that inspired our entire community program? Yes, sir. And this is my daddy, Emma said proudly, as Marcus joined them, looking slightly overwhelmed by the presence of so many corporate executives. Marcus, Chairman Henderson said, standing and extending his hand, I want you to know that your simple act of kindness has created ripple effects throughout our entire organization. Because of what you did that day, we've been able to help dozens of families and businesses in our community. Marcus shook the chairman's hand, still seeming stunned by the surreal nature of the situation. I just did what anyone would do, sir. Victoria needed help and we were able to provide it. That's exactly my point, Chairman Henderson replied. You saw someone in need and chose to help, even when it might have cost you something. That's the kind of character we want to celebrate and support. As the event continued throughout the afternoon, Victoria moved through the crowd with a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced in her professional life. She watched Henderson Industries employees connecting with community members, forming relationships that extended far beyond corporate social responsibility initiatives. The highlight of the day came when Sarah's father performed a song he had written about the community outreach program, with Emma and the other children joining in for the chorus. The entire room sang along, creating a moment of genuine unity that Victoria knew would be remembered long after any formal presentation would be forgotten. As the afternoon drew to a close, Chairman Henderson approached Victoria one final time. I have an announcement to make, he said, loud enough for nearby employees to hear. Effective immediately, Victoria is being promoted to Senior Vice President of Community Relations. Her new position will focus entirely on expanding and developing our outreach programs. The spontaneous applause that followed was the sweetest sound Victoria had ever heard in her professional life. But even sweeter was the sight of Emma jumping up and down with excitement, and Marcus beaming with pride as if Victoria's success was his own. Later that evening, as volunteers helped clean up the conference center, Victoria found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a stressed executive focused solely on climbing the corporate ladder. Now she was surrounded by people who had become genuine friends, working in a role that allowed her to make a real difference in her community. Victoria, Emma said, tugging on her sleeve as the cleanup continued around them. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Are you happy now? You don't look worried anymore like you did that first day. Victoria knelt down and pulled Emma into a hug, feeling overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of this remarkable child. I'm happier than I've ever been, Em, and it's all because you and your daddy taught me something very important. What did we teach you? You taught me that the best things in life happen when people choose to be kind to each other, even when they don't have to be. Emma smiled her brightest smile and hugged Victoria tighter. Daddy always says that kindness is like cake. When you share it with someone, you both get to enjoy it. As Victoria looked around at the community of people who had rallied to help her succeed, she realized that Emma was absolutely right. The kindness that had started with a simple chocolate mousse cake had multiplied into something beautiful and lasting, touching more lives than any of them could have imagined. The wrong dessert had indeed led to the right heart, and in finding her heart, Victoria had discovered her true purpose. 1 year later, Victoria stood in the middle of what had once been an empty lot across from Sweet Dreams Bakery. The space was now home to the Henderson Community Center, a beautiful facility that housed after-school programs, small business, workshops, and community meeting spaces. The center had become the hub of the neighborhood, a place where families gathered and dreams took root. Today was the grand opening celebration, and Victoria found herself overwhelmed by how much had changed since that desperate afternoon when she had needed a chocolate mousse cake for a board meeting. The single act of kindness from Marcus and Emma had grown into something that touched hundreds of lives throughout the community. Chairman Henderson stood at the podium, addressing the crowd of community members, Henderson Industries employees, and local media who had gathered for the ceremony. When we started this community outreach program, he said, we thought we were simply making a charitable investment. What we discovered instead was that supporting our community has transformed our entire company culture. Victoria smiled as she watched Emma, now 9 years old, sitting in the front row with a notebook where she was carefully recording everything that happened. Emma had declared herself the official historian of the community center project, documenting every milestone with the same serious attention she had brought to her role as Victoria's assistant during the employee appreciation event. Marcus was standing with the other local business owners who had benefited from Henderson Industries' programs. Sweet Dreams Bakery had expanded again, now employing 12 people and serving as a training center for other aspiring entrepreneurs. The success had allowed Marcus to provide Emma with opportunities he had never dreamed possible, but more importantly, it had given him the satisfaction of helping other single parents navigate the challenges he had once faced alone. I'd like to invite Victoria Martinez, our Senior Vice President of Community Relations, to share some thoughts about this remarkable journey, Chairman Henderson announced. Victoria approached the podium, looking out at faces that had become dear to her over the past year. In the crowd, she could see Mrs. Johnson, who had become a volunteer coordinator for the senior programs at the community center. Miguel's mother was there with her colleagues from the hospital, who had helped establish a health clinic that operated out of the center 2 days a week. Sarah's father had started a music program that brought together children and seniors for weekly concerts. A year ago, Victoria began, I walked into Sweet Dreams Bakery as a desperate executive who thought success meant climbing the corporate ladder as quickly as possible. I was so focused on impressing my colleagues that I had forgotten what it meant to genuinely connect with other people. She paused, looking directly at Marcus and Emma. Marcus and Emma changed my perspective on everything. They showed me that real success isn't measured in quarterly profits or promotion announcements. It's measured in the relationships we build and the positive impact we have on each other's lives. Victoria went on to share statistics about the community center's programs, but the numbers only told part of the story. The real story was in the faces of the children who now had safe places to go after school, the small business owners who had received mentorship and support, and the families who had found a community that genuinely cared about their well-being. The Henderson Community Center represents what happens when businesses choose to invest in people rather than just profits, Victoria continued. But more than that, it represents what happens when individuals choose kindness over convenience, generosity over self-interest. As Victoria concluded her remarks, she announced the final surprise of the day. Henderson Industries had established an endowment that would ensure the community center's programs could continue indefinitely, regardless of changes in corporate leadership or economic conditions. We're also announcing the Emma Martinez Scholarship Fund, Victoria said, using the surname she had legally adopted when Marcus had asked her to marry him 6 months earlier. This scholarship will provide full college funding for children from single-parent households who demonstrate academic excellence and community service. Emma's mouth fell open in surprise. She had known about the community center and the various programs, but no one had told her that a scholarship fund would bear her name. Marcus wrapped his arm around his daughter, his own eyes bright with tears of pride and amazement. After the ceremony, as people mingled and explored the new facility, Victoria found herself standing in the children's library with Emma. The walls were decorated with artwork created by kids in the after-school program, and comfortable reading nooks invited families to spend time together with books. Victoria, Emma said thoughtfully, do you remember that first day when you came to the bakery and you looked so worried? I remember it perfectly, sweetheart. I was just thinking about how you needed help that day, and Daddy helped you, and then you helped us, and then we all helped each other. And now look at all this. Emma gestured around the beautiful space filled with families and children. What's your point, Em? Emma grinned with the wisdom that had always made her seem older than her years. My point is that kindness is kind of like making bread. You start with just a little bit of good stuff, but if you take care of it and share it with other people, it grows into something big enough to feed everyone. Victoria laughed and hugged her stepdaughter, marveling at how this remarkable child continued to offer profound insights wrapped in simple metaphors. That's exactly right, Em. Kindness grows when we share it. As the sun set over the Henderson Community Center, Victoria stood with Marcus on the observation deck that overlooked the entire facility. Children were playing in the outdoor activity area while their parents attended a small business workshop in the conference room. Teenagers were practicing music in the arts building, while seniors shared stories in the community lounge. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Johnsons hadn't been so understanding that day?" Marcus asked, pulling Victoria close as they watched their community thrive. "I think about it sometimes," Victoria admitted. "But then I remember what Emma always says about kindness. If it hadn't been the chocolate mousse cake, it would have been something else. Good people find ways to help each other, it's just who they are." Marcus smiled and kissed the top of Victoria's head. "I love you for seeing the best in everyone, even when they can't see it in themselves." "I learned that from you," Victoria replied. "You saw potential in a desperate executive having the worst day of her career. You chose to help a stranger even when it might have cost you something important." "And look what happened," Marcus said, gesturing toward the community center where their neighbors and friends were building relationships and creating opportunities together. One small act of kindness became all of this. As they stood together, watching their community flourish, Victoria reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a corporate executive focused on individual success, but she had discovered that the most meaningful achievements were the ones that lifted up entire communities. The wrong dessert had indeed led her to the right heart, and in opening her heart to others, Victoria had found a richness that no corporate promotion could ever provide. The chocolate mousse cake was long gone, but the sweetness of the relationships it had created would last a lifetime. Emma appeared on the observation deck, carrying 3 cups of hot chocolate from the community center's cafe. "I thought you might be thirsty," she said, handing drinks to her parents with the same thoughtful generosity that had defined their family from the beginning. As the 3 of them stood together, watching their community thrive in the golden evening light, Victoria knew that this was what true success looked like. It wasn't measured in profits or promotions, but in the love shared between family and friends, and in the knowledge that their actions had made the world a little bit kinder for everyone around them.